good the video's still up here.
All right, we're live.
Good evening and welcome to the January 28th meeting of the Planning Policy Commission. Tonight we're going to, after presentation from Trish, have a public hearing on a proposed list of the comprehensive plan amendments for this year. But first, we have to approve the minutes of our last meeting, which was in October 1st. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make such a motion.
I'll second it.
Any discussion, changes? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the minutes for the October meeting of the Planning Policy Commission are hereby approved. So with that, we're going to open up to Trish to tell us a little bit about what the public hearing is about tonight.
We start out the new year with a new list of comprehensive plan amendments, and that's our purpose for tonight. As you might remember, the Growth Management Act of the state says the comprehensive plan is very important. It's a policy document for your jurisdiction. It's the umbrella to which everything needs to fit underneath, and you can only amend it once a year. And that's so comprehensively, you look at all the impacts of your choices at one time that year to change or modify your policies of your city. So that's their intent, and so we can only do it once a year, so we have to establish the list in the beginning of the year, and then you can't add anything the entire year. Those have to go to next year. If someone in June, as I said, comes in with a fabulous idea, we can't look at it until the next round of the docket amendments. The way we do this requirement is we call it a docket, and we have it in the code how you create a docket, and we gather information and ideas the previous year that didn't make it into last year's docket, and we hold this hearing. By code, it has to be done by the end of January in order to get it to the council in February. And they look at it, and then they should have a list established in March. And this is the crazy chart that's in our land use code that shows all the decisions and all the input times that get worked through, and the little circle, the second circle with the deadline, that's where we are right now, is establishing the docket, and it has to be done by your second meeting in January or by the end of January. Okay. The land use code, on the other hand, we can do as many code amendments at any time of the year as staff can work on. It's very different than the comprehensive plan. We quit making dockets for the code amendments a few years ago because there were so many that it was overwhelming. This year, it'll be a little overwhelming because we have all of round 3 for the central standards. You might remember fondly round 1 and round 2 that you all worked on last year. This is round 3, and there's 22 amendments on there. We're going to do it in 3 stages, we hope, maybe Act 1, Act 2, and the final. We haven't quite decided how to call them. We also have Old Town standards. The task force just finished up from their work last year, and they have all sorts of ideas for how we could change the standards in Old Town. So we're working on those this year. There's going to be an exciting one on marijuana this year that has to be done by June, merging the medical and recreational somehow before the state deadline in June. That's another exciting one. So there's all sorts of code amendments coming to you soon, but we don't actually have a concrete list because it's just changing too much. But know that they are coming. We're not just doing comp plan this year. I thought I would put the list that you have in your packet and flip through. There's 3 pages of them. I believe there are 20. We have them broken down into new amendments, or I start with annual. Those are the easiest to talk about. There's some that we do every year, and that's our transportation improvement program, which is the amount of money that we allocate to our transportation program each year, and you all have a hearing in front of, with our city engineer, and they go through the transportation, the TIP, as we call it. They go through that with you every year, and you make a recommendation to the council. We do that every year. That's part of the comprehensive plan. And also the capital facilities program, which would be like parks and trucks and other facilities that the city purchases or plans to purchase the next year that keeps us going with our level of service commitment that we make to the community. We do that every year. We update our population every year so that all our forecasting is accurate. And we also do what we call community facility redesignation and rezones every year. And those are when the city purchases property. Usually it's with a FEMA grant, FEMA monies, which is the Federal Emergency Management Agency, perhaps? What else would A? It's the group that gives money to buy flood-prone properties, and we've gotten a lot of those monies over the years. And we take the zoning off of them, whatever they were, single-family, multifamily, commercial, and we make them community facilities zone, which shows that they're publicly owned for public purpose. Usually it's a recreation zone for just parks and kind of opens, or there's an open space kind of a zone, meaning floods, and we're just leaving it natural. There's 5 of those this year, and I'll quickly run through, just for excitement, where they are. The first of the 5 is in what we call the Atlas development, and they're giving us over an acre and a half park. They have to give us, because it's part of their approval, and it's going to be community facilities recreation, and it's going to be in the middle of their project, and it'll be for the public. It'll also be for the folks that live there, but it'll also be a community park there, right off of Gilman. And there's 2 on either side of Dogwood. Both would be open space. I believe those are flood prone, seeing the creek and the buffer going right through. And the little parentheses was the owner that we were able to get them from. 4 and 5 are off of Front Street and Newport, and 5, I think, is flood prone, and 4, we own some of the parcels to the north, and so we're trying to put them together to do, and we're proposing the zoning to be facilities, which allows you more leeway at what the use would be. So it might even actually get to have a building on it. If it becomes a park, it might have a restroom or something like that on it. As you can see, they're pretty little parcels, so it wouldn't be like a fire station or like a big building. But the facilities zone allows you a little more leeway in what you might put there. But again, it would have to be for public purpose. Are there any questions on the 5? I don't know much about them other than what I said. And the other exciting one that's not technically community facilities because it's not publicly owned, but one of our community members has asked for her property, her vacant property, to be rezoned to conservancy. And she has a contract. She went through the whole process of, the name just escaped me, but to put a conservation easement on her property up here, up at the top of 56th. And it's, and I put the language right from the conservation easement, that for the purpose of forever conserving the open space, character, ecological significance, native vegetation, and wildlife habitat features of the subject property, which is really amazing that a landowner would do that. And it's almost a full acre, and it's a beautiful little piece of land, and she's required to keep it maintained and marvelous for wildlife and all those good purposes. So I lumped that, even though that was her request to us, it still, to me, sort of fit into the public purpose kind of rezone. So that's why I lumped this request in with that. Any questions on this one? Okay, back to the not so exciting ones. The sustainable indicators that you adopted last year to put in the appendix, we're updating those with new data. We try to do that as often as possible. The transportation element, if you remember when we were certified last year in June when we finished, you all finished the comp plan update that took 2 years, the big one last year. PSRC came back, they loved it, but they had some ideas that they wanted us to add the next time. One of it is to recognize state-owned facilities, They're nothing that would have stopped our certification, but they thought they could make our plan even better if we would do a couple of things. So I don't think those will be very hard. There are 2 items that have been requested for the Central Issaquah Plan. One of those is to move the boundary to include the Staples area, take it out of Old Town and put it into Central Issaquah. So we'll look at that. I haven't quite figured it out yet, but one of the Economic Development Economic Vitality Commission was looking at anchor projects that would vitalize the central plan, and they thought that corner would be a really good corner for an anchor project, till we said, it's really technically not in the central plan, it's in Old Town. You know, it's where they collide, but so they said, well, you should look at changing the boundary, because that would be a fabulous place for an anchor project. I said, okay, we'll look at it, but I don't know if you've seen the video that they did, the Economic Vitality Commission, on possible anchor projects, sites in town. I think it's on the website, but they did a fabulous video, you know, standing right on the different corners where they think it would be a really good idea. I thought, oh, we should get PPC out there to do a video on. I'm not sure what the topic would be, but it was a fabulous video I thought they did. But that's one of our amendments we get to look at this year. And the 7th one is Old Town, the task force. They came up with some plan changes that they would like to see us look at. So that's going to be a fun one. I think there's only a few for the plan. They have a lot of code amendments for Old Town, but I think they only have a few suggestions for the plan. All of the elements need an implementation strategy. Last year, if you remember, we made the elements shorter and just policy instead of having all the implementation ideas mixed in, because it was kind of confusing. So we took all the implementation out, and now we have to firm up how you implement each chapter, because we couldn't do both pieces last year. So that's going to be a big part, is thinking up ways that we would know that, for example, the land use element is successful because this is how we implemented it. And so I think that's going to be really fun to talk about those kinds of things this year. The development agreements in Issaquah Highlands and Talus have almost run out. They were 20-year plans that we did back in, would that be 95 and 96? And in 2017 is when they're supposed to sunset, which means they would go to regular zoning. And since they're so very different than any other zoning we have in town, we have to sort of ease them into what would that look like when they turn back into regular zoning. And so we're not sure if we need a comprehensive plan amendment for that, but we wanted to put a placeholder in case there's something up there in either of the urban villages that doesn't have like sort of a safety net policy in the comp plan. So we don't really know if we need that, but as I said, if something happened in June and we realized we needed something, we wouldn't be able to do it this year. We'd have to wait till the next year, and by then they'd be sunsetting and we'd be lost. So this is sort of a placeholder because we're not really sure what it looks like. We've never had to close out a development agreement before. So we're trying to think of every situation.
Just a quick question on that. Has there been any discussion with the developers? Have they come forward with any questions? Okay.
Because some of them are really happy. There's that they're just about, because a lot of pieces have moved very far from 20 years ago, as you can imagine. And so some of them are looking forward to, and some are them sunsetting and maybe getting to use some different standards or some, but in both of them, there's not a lot of parcels left. But there are some that they're wanting to hang on. If they could just do an extension for 18 months, could they keep the existing development for another year? So we're trying to negotiate and figure out, what's the best all around. Do you sunset it with some criteria, or do you, but again, we've never had to do this before. So we're sitting down with the master developers and trying to walk through it together to see what works best for, even just figuring out the zoning, because the sizes of the parcels, in the Highlands, there's such density and there's uses that are mixed, and so just even finding a zoning category, because right now the whole thing is one zone. it's urban village. And, you know, if you go traditionally, you got your residential, you got your mixed use, you have your office. So it's even just figuring out how to parcel it out is just kind of like a coloring book that you haven't invented yet. So it's kind of exciting, but we don't really know what it's gonna mean. Any other questions on that one? 18 is an exciting one. This is the mayor's request to remove East Cougar Mountain from the city's PAA, and here's a map of East Cougar. And we had our meeting on, the King County meeting on it last night, and I'll show you the little video that we put together of driving through and walking through the area. Just 2 minutes. It was really well done. Our IT, Tim Smith, did a fabulous job on it. Any questions on that one?
I just have one, just for background. There was some mention in the letter of Talus potentially looking at that area earlier, and was there a reason that they rejected going forward with that?
Actually, that's part of the last one. I lied. The very last one is the little star. Can you see? The 20th Amendment is the property owner there, the blacks, would like to annex those 10 acres and get access through Talus. And they came in, actually it was more property owners last year, came in and they weren't able to make a deal with the Talus master developer. And also the folks that live in Talus were not really excited about more development happening out there in the more rural area. And so that one went away. The master developer pulled that one. And so this one came back as just the 10 acres. And we let him know that the mayor has come forward and said, you know, after the council talked about this all last summer with the comp plan update, he's making his move to say, okay, county, we're ready to ask you this. And so the blacks are trying different ways with the master developer to see if maybe they can get access but not annex, and just for the 2 houses, not for 50, or I think they asked for almost 100 last time with a strip of property. So that one is, they still wanted to keep this as a placeholder in case they couldn't figure out another way to work through with the master developer. But the mayor, and it's listed on your packet that's the only one that the administration doesn't support because it's in conflict with the mayor's request to King County. And the one in between, not to make it any less exciting, this would be the last potential annexation area that we have, and we call that the King County Island, and it has the King County shop site in it now. They're trying to move it because they have to, of course, go through the freeway interchange. You know, I don't know if you've ever been back there, but it's a little, now there's a traffic light at least, but it's tricky to get out of there. They just want to move. And our shop site is also back in there, although ours is in the city limits. But we're going to try and annex that this year, and then we'll be all annexed and we won't have any other potential annexation areas. We'll be as full as we should ever be. So that's kind of exciting. And you guys would be part of the annexation, I believe. Actually, no, since it's already in the comp plan as a PAA, I'm not sure that you will be. But I'll have to check that. But because usually you guys at least get to say, yeah, that looks right when we do annexations. So that's exciting. Are there questions on any of the 20?
So, the Cougar Mountain, East Cougar Mountain, was that the property that we had discussed several years ago about annexing into the city, and the city was having trouble getting utilities and stuff? And so is that piece of property?
Right,
Okay.
right.
So now what happens to it if the Issaquah doesn't annex it, and Bellevue doesn't want it?
Right, then it would stay in King County, and the line, as you see, the heavy red line is now what we call the urban growth boundary. The King County would move the urban growth boundary to follow our city limits, which it is the rest of like the south and all through Grand Ridge and around. That's all the urban growth boundary. We're like the farthest out. And so this would again allow more rural area. The zoning would change in that instead of having the suffix over it called urban reserve, that if you meet all this criteria, you could get more density. One of the criteria is being annexed by the city, that you can have more density, but that would go away and it would just be rural. So it would be the same, like some of them are rural 1 acre lots, some of them are rural 5 acre lots, and so that zoning would just stay there. So they wouldn't, but they would lose that opportunity that if they ever got annexed, they could get more density. When you're up there, it's, a lot of the areas are very steep and very critical areas with wetlands and streams and beautiful area though. But when we looked up there and went around, we can't imagine putting any density up there because the roadway, I'm gonna step away from the microphone. You can see there's a hairpin turn over the top of the line. There's just no way that we could imagine to get that road to be a standard road. I mean, it's, even on a really nice day, it was like holding on to it's really steep. And there's, everybody up there has just private water wells. The loop that's the little neighborhood at Edge Hill, they have their own little water system. And as King County said last night, they can still try to hook up to public water if they can get it through Bellevue or through Issaquah, but if they're rural, they're not allowed to do sewer. I'm not sure why the county makes that distinction, but they do. I'd never heard that before, but I can imagine sewer would be really hard to figure out how to do that. But they're still served by Eastside Fire and Rescue as they are today, and they would still be served by King County Sheriff as they are today. So the only things that would change would be the urban reserve zoning category would come off. Any other questions about? So tonight is the public hearing. February, the Council Land and Shore would look at your recommendation, and March they would have the final action on the list. And then we work on it all year and hopefully bring it back to you in September, depending on how long it takes us in between all the code amendments. And then the council would take action in December. Any questions on that? Does anybody want to see the video of the East Cougar PAA for 2 minutes?
Sure.
Do you want to dim the lights maybe a little bit? Let's see, let me get out of here.
Turn them all off
And I'm going to just say ahead of time, because there was kind of a squeal when we started it yesterday, the camera is mounted on the car as we're driving through the little skinny roads and up the hairpin. So I kept kind of holding on to my chair as we were going over the speed bumps, even though you can't tell, you can see the speed bump coming and it just feels like you're going to go over. But so I just wanted to warn you, it seems like you're driving very fast through this, but you're really not. It's just he's sped up the camera.
Cougar Mountain potential annexation area covers 776 acres and includes 83 acres of King County land. The area is adjacent to Cougar Mountain Regional Wildland Park. In the early 1990s, the area became a potential annexation area, or PAA, as King County worked to establish an urban growth boundary under the state's Growth Management Act. After 20 years of growth, Issaquah has requested for East Cougar Mountain to be removed from Issaquah's potential annexation area for several reasons. The area is not suitable for urban growth due to environmental constraints such as steep slopes and streams, wooded hillsides, and rural large lots. The area is not served by public sewers or standard roads. Issaquah would have difficulty providing urban services to this area. East Cougar Mountain is no longer necessary to accommodate Issaquah's urban growth targets. For these reasons, Issaquah has no intention of annexing East Cougar Mountain. In addition, the city supports changing the designation of this area to rural.
Isn't that beautiful? It's just beautiful up there. Any questions?
Car's sick now. Car's sick now. Car's sick from,
Yeah, it was making me dizzy.
I was holding on.
It's a beautiful area.
There's a couple of lookouts that you come around the corner, and when we first were up there, it was like, what is that down there? I was like, that's the Highlands down there. To look down on the Highlands, it was just really hard to figure out where you really were. That, up, it's just the whole.
Are there trails up through all that area?
Yeah, the wildland park is amazing.
Okay, anybody have any other thoughts? Okay, so I'm going to open the public hearing at 6:52.
57.
All right, 57. Hearing and seeing no one to comment, I will close the public hearing at 6:58. Is there anything else that you need?
Is there a recommendation on the docket?
Oh,
We need to,
How do you feel about all of them? Any of them seem stressful or
do you think anything else needs to be added to have the city look at next year that would cause consternation for next year?
no,
So with that, do I have a motion to approve the docket as written?
I'll make such a motion.
I'll second that motion.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So be it. So with that, if there's nothing else to discuss this evening, if anybody has anything for the common good? If not,
when's the next meeting, do you know?
February, I've asked Dave if he can bring the first pieces and parts of the marijuana amendment at the last meeting in February. So that's what we're hoping for.
so it's not till the end
The
of February.
25th, right, right. And I was curious, I haven't ever done that before, but I put in all the work that you did last year and then how it ended, because I thought probably sometimes you don't know how all your hard work turns into real ordinances and legislation and things. So I thought that was probably my fault that I didn't let you know how it all works out really well. In fact, this morning at the Puget Sound Regional Council Executive Board confirmed or certified us as a regional growth center. So, and that's taken a couple years to finally get through. So now we're eligible for a lot more grant money than for transportation, especially than we used to be. So that's good. And we're in line for a bike share program. By the end of the year, we're supposed to have some locations chosen in the city for a bike share program. We're one of 3 jurisdictions that received the grant from, of course, I don't know now, but we're working with 2 other jurisdictions, and it's really exciting and I can't remember how many stations, but that'll be coming to you all as well. Just to, I don't know exactly what the process is. I know it'll have to go to council. But one of the amendments we're doing is doing a code amendment to make sure that bike stations are, that you can have bike stations in all the and right of way, of course, or in, like if we want it at the transit center, or if we want it at a school, or if we want it, all the locations that you might want a bike share program. So we're excited about that. And that reminds me, the other piece is, I don't know if you all saw the article about Sound Transit 3, and we were misquoted, or someone misquoted us that said that Issaquah does not allow light rail facilities in the city, which typically light rail would be in your right-of-way, and which is owned by the public, and so we just thought that was a little crazy. But we're actually going to put an amendment together to make sure that it is totally crystal clear that we can have light rail come to the city and it would be okay with our land use. So we're going to do that in the bike share amendment at the same time, just so the region doesn't have any questions about our intent with, as far as ways of traveling that are not a single occupancy vehicle. So we're excited about both of those two things.
Sometimes, well, a lot of times, we all feel the government goes very slowly to get things done, but all those things in the background have to be done, so.
Yeah,
Okay, so with
so I'm
that,
done.
as I kind of do every January, I want to make sure that our wonderful listening public understands that there are openings on the Planning Policy Commission. And if you are so interested, please fill out an application that you can get online and let us know. You do not have to be a resident of the city. It'd be nice if you were close, but you don't have to be that's not a
Prerequisite.
requirement. So with that, I'm going to close the meeting at 7:02.
Wow, thank
Very
you.
much.
Thank
Very
you for
good.
coming tonight. It's very exciting, and the reason, I'll wait till we're off the air.